My great-grandfather was born in 1924 on Easter Sunday at 619 South Walnut, just 6 blocks down the street from the Fox Cities Performing Arts Center he built 78 years later.
My dad grew up in a construction family during the Depression. 4 families tried to make ends meet at a time when nobody was building anything. Life was a lot different then. Dad always had a close childhood relationship with his grandfather, who'd started Martin Boldt & Sons, a family-operated carpentry shop, in 1889 with an ad that simply read, "Martin Boldt, honest and reliable contractor." My dad was very, very fond of his grandfather, and perhaps because my grandfather was working a lot, my dad had a lot of time to spend with him, and they lived in the neighborhood. The story that I remember is them walking down to the drugstore and my great-grandfather buying a little container of ice cream. And this is in the wintertime, I guess. And so I can just imagine, this grandfather and this little boy walking hand in hand to the drugstore, and the little boy looking up and, oh my goodness, in anticipation of this little container of ice cream, and then walking back to my great-grandfather's house and them having vanilla ice cream and saltine crackers. Now that's not exactly the big sundae or the chocolate thing with nuts or anything like that, but just imagine that kind of a memory that you have. There's little intimate moments that I think are fun stories maybe to tell about growing up in Appleton. In 1931, by the time my dad was 7 years old, the family business was doing more commercial work. Martin turned the business over to his son, Oscar J. Boldt, my dad's dad, who named it Oscar J. Boldt Construction.
He was given 70 cents to do the groceries for his mother, and being an entrepreneuring young mind, he decided to pocket some of the extra change. His mother didn't say anything, but she kind of knew that he pocketed some change. He didn't feel very good about that, and that was sort of a hard lesson for him, and I think that kind of was a very profound early experience that shaped how he thought about honesty, and he knew that he was doing the wrong thing, and that was enough.
I think mostly when people talk about my grandpa, they talk so much about his character. They always say, oh, he was just such an incredible person. He was so honest, he was so humble, he was so kind. And I guess it started really early with just this one story.
My dad learned the value of hard work firsthand, not only by Appleton life going on around him, but by the challenges of a family construction business during the Depression, when more than his own family relied on it to make a living. He was acutely aware of that kind of responsibility at a very young age.
Allegedly, when he was a young kid, he got this sort of odd idea to sell sleigh rides with a hamburger. So the idea is, 10 cents a ride gets you a hamburger and a ride. So a ride and a hamburger for 10 cents, and the hamburgers are 6 for 25 cents. So he's loading up on these hamburgers, and evidently it didn't quite stick. He's left with all these hamburgers, and it's sort of a lesson in capitalism. When you can lose too.
I think another thing that was very important for my dad in this relationship with his grandfather just probably was the building of the business, and that young man coming from Brillion and setting up a business in Appleton, a growing town, and just thinking about that as that he had this idea and he built it up and provided services to lots of different companies or families or businesses. And maybe that was an inspiration of building on a family legacy, because his grandfather started the business and then he saw the growth and development, and then probably almost the hard stop of a depression, but enjoyment of building and being involved in improving your community probably was an inspiration for my dad. Well, when I think of my dad's service during the war, the military had a very good training system, and with my dad's affinity to math, he was able to figure out this navigation stuff pretty well. He was very, very good at that. Now again, he'd never been in an airplane before, and as he said that, the first time he went up, he threw up. But I can't imagine where you have these young men, they're put in this big plane, and you're supposed to fly to North Africa, and you've got this 19-year-old kid that's responsible for getting this plane from the United States to North Africa. And if you're wrong, you're in the ocean. You grow up really fast, I would imagine, in those kinds of things. So that's that first thing, and I think, oh my gosh, the responsibility, the burden that's placed on you. You're responsible for this entire crew to get them safely to their destination. And he used that illusion oftentimes in describing what our business is like. You need to be able to get to the destination, complete the job, and return safely to base. In November of 1945, my dad registered for the January semester at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, the day after his release from service. He spent those couple of months between service and school working for Boldt Construction, and learned pretty quickly of the enormous responsibility that would lie ahead if there were to be a solid future for the family business.
People say, how did you and Oscar meet? And I said, on a blind date, and that kind of turns people off, except this was an interesting blind date. This was back in '46. Some of the one organization at Lawrence decided they would have a hag drag, which meant that the girls could ask the boys to go to this party. But one of the girls developed a dreadful sinus infection, running a temperature and all that stuff. She said to me, would you like to take my place? And I said, certainly. So the day came, or the night came, and I went down and I met Oscar, and we went out and we stepped into the back seat of the car, and just as I stepped into the back seat, the choker broke, and all these gold beads all over the back seat, and then we were looking in the snowbank, and so that was our beginning. Then he went off to Madison, and he would get home, and so then we would have a date. Life progressed, and as I said, it wasn't love at first sight or any of that kind of stuff. It was just kind of nice. He was talking about what his future ideas were for his life. He said, I really have always wanted to be in construction. As the afternoon progressed, I realized that this man was going to ask me to marry him. And so he was in the middle of proposing with on bended knee, as we were supposed to do, and the telephone rang. And of course he got up and answered it. Which I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I suppose I laughed. And he answered the phone, and he came back and finished his proposal, and he had a ring ready to give me. And we were just so happy.
You can't really talk about Grandpa without talking about Grandma too. I think she had just such a strong influence on him in a great way.
Just in awe at how long they were together and the admiration for each other and how they really made each other better.
I was asking him what was he most proud of in OC, just without skipping a beat. It was like, what I'm most proud of is my marriage to Pat. For all the things that might have the Boldt name on it, for their marriage to be the thing that he's most proud of is a pretty special thing.
I said, I'm not interested in how much money you can make, because I can live on whatever you bring home. But the important thing is that you make it honestly. And I should not have even had to say that, because O.C. Boldt was basically so honest that nobody had to preach to him.